Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 331 for Monday, January 6th, 2025. Better make sure I got that right. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including YouTube. And if you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is the New Year's Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
I have not got the year wrong yet, knock on wood. Even the muscle memory in my hands as I've been typing the last couple of days has managed to hit it right. So we'll see. We do need to update the templates for our show notes, though. I put that on my to-do list as soon as you mentioned it, because sooner or later, one of us will just read and mention the wrong year for sure. And speaking of the new year, what Johnny and I have been doing over the holidays, celebrating the new year, celebrating Christmas. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about that, maybe some of the gift exchanges and the food, that we experienced over the holidays, then you should check out the Render Distance. It is the extended version of the program. It's available on patreon.com/thespawnchunks to anybody that supports the podcast. You get an extra 15 to 30 minutes of content every single week, along with other bonus content like the monthly hangouts that happen at the end of the month usually. So you've got one coming up in January. And we also have the quarterly hangouts. That's where we go over the data, the numbers, the figures, the downloads for the podcast. And that's probably coming up in early February to give Acast a chance for the numbers to accumulate for the final episodes of 2024. Because not only is this going to be a quarterly summary, but we're going to look at the year as a whole, 2024, on the Spawn Chunks and the things that we've done and what we're looking forward to do. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then check out patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And speaking of Patreon, there are some changes coming. We mentioned this on the show a couple times at the end of the year. We've, of course, been talking with our patrons about it for the last few months, and that process has started. So we are going to be moving to a subscription-based Patreon page as opposed to per episode. Is going to be a monthly subscription. That process has been started. We are just currently waiting for Patreon to reach out. Some of the people there are going to walk us through those changes because we have a unique situation, and we'll just keep everybody informed as that progresses.
Yep. So over the holidays, obviously, we've had a lot of time to play Minecraft. I expect a lot of the listeners at home will have had a bit of extra holiday time if it's a holiday time of year for them. So hopefully people have been out there playing their games. How about you, Joel? Have you managed to fit in any Minecraft time over the Christmas break?
I did. I continued the work on the abandoned farmstead that I started. I was really excited to have a project to use all of the Pale Garden biome blocks that I had gone and collected just before the holidays. And so in between Christmas and New Year's, I fit in a couple streams, and I was basically back to my regular streaming schedule as of the third, because I had a power outage on the second, I think, and I couldn't get there. But I've put together an abandoned barn on the property. I've finalized the textures of the house, and both of them have giant holes in the roof. And this is the first time that I've done something that's been this run down. I've made walls that have been run down, but this is like a building that is basically abandoned, and I was really trying to make it look like it's been weathered and the paint's been all stripped and like all that kind of stuff. And I have to say, the pale moss, pale oak leaves, and the pale moss carpet came in extraordinarily handy. I was thinking that this could have been a roof that maybe once upon a time was like a thatch roof or a hay bale roof. And because it's been, completely unattended to for many, many years, having a combination of moss that's growing now, but also moss that has died and is kind of twiggy and kind of hanging over in places, really, really helped. And I thought it was going to be a tougher transition from the green to the gray, but there's a lot more green in pale moss than you realize, and they go really well together. And so it was really fun to put this all together. I was using some alternate bush blocks. I was using some azalea, but also jungle and birch. Birch leaf blocks have a really, not dead, but like it's kind of like the halfway between gray and dead and green and alive. So it has like a muted color to it. So that really worked well for some things I wanted to hang over the edge that might look like they're the last legs of their life, maybe a little bit dried out. And then I was also working on the structure of everything, and I had hoped to use more pale oak. I thought the pale oak was going to be a really good wood block to use for beams or supports, and it did work for textures. Pale oak bark goes really well with basalt, But I ended up using polished basalt for beams in most cases. There were a couple situations in the house where I decided to leave the exposed white end of a pale oak log, but very often I was using basalt and then just sprinkling in the pale oak as texture. It still does work very well because it has that scaly look to the bark. So it's like a weird mix between wood bark and like cobblestone texture. It's kind of halfway in between. And I think I've used it a couple times in pathing as well to try to move from like a cobblestone to a muddy area. It has enough kind of reddish in it. Something I did notice actually is that while the pale moss and moss carpets are, and the pale oak leaves are a little bit more green, like it's very subtle. They're more of a cool gray, whereas the gray and brown of the pale oak log is more warm. And so they go well in contrast together, but if you're trying to move grays together, you'll very quickly notice the temperature changes, like between a gravel and a pale oak log or something like that. So you got to kind of pick and choose what blocks you want to mix together. But I feel like it came together pretty well. I did end up with more space on the property than I thought, so I put together another outbuilding, but it's like a 2 meter foundation. There's nothing. There's no roof. There's nothing left of it. It's just been crumbled over. I even took one of the beams that would have been a structural beam and kind of like laid it sideways on the ground to kind of illustrate that it had fallen over. And that's an idea I got from, I think it was one of the concept art pieces we saw ages ago for like a birch forest where they had like birch logs horizontally in the biome generating. And it's so funny, just the illusion of time or movement that you can have in an area where you've got several of these very distinct looking polished basalt beams vertical, but then to have one on the ground horizontal, like immediately your brain goes, that used to be standing and now it's fallen over. And so it was a neat trick. And then the rest of the time it was just me puttering around as you do with landscaping and like green bits and grass and moss and carpet and concrete powder, just kind of making things look really overgrown. Still a work in progress. We have the fields to do yet. We've got the pathing to do yet. So it's one of those multi-stream projects, but I really like the way that it's coming together. It's filling in the area, and from a distance on the roads, you can really see it because the green roof really stands out in places. And so it immediately says like, what's that over there? Maybe I want to go check that out, which is a nice thing, when you're designing an area to have that kind of like curiosity from a distance.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it looks really great. The
Thank you.
Green and gray combo really does stand out. It's something else I noticed about it when I was doing the comparison between pale moss mining and regular moss mining, was how much of a contrast you get between the green and gray of moss and then stone, and how much pale moss blends in with that, and also really blends in with tuff once you get down into like deep slate layers. And so you'll find that you can make really interesting contrasting effects, and like in this case, the pale moss can blend in on one side and the green moss can stand out on the other side, and that mimics a little bit of how moss forms in real life, how it'll form on like the north side of trees or the south side of trees, depending on which angle the sun comes from. And so you end up having that as part of the landmark as well. But I really like the aesthetic. I remember back in, I think decidedly vanilla season 2, like really early in my Java Minecraft career, I ended up building something that was a set of ruins and using a lot of like mossy cobblestone, but it felt like there was nowhere near the diversity of block palette that you have now to make builds like this. Even going back to Empires Season 2, when I was building a ruined area, would have absolutely killed for having pale moss back then, with pale moss carpets and everything. So I think that's it's great to have that stuff. Pale moss is so good, not just because of it being a block in its own right, but because of how well it blends with existing materials we already had. It was sort of filling a gap that we didn't know we needed filled, but it seems to work really well. And on the subject of, decorating with a few more of those organic materials, some folks pointed out to me, I think in my stream chat recently, that one of the great things you can do with pale moss is have plants and grass grow out of what seems like a stone path, but all you need to do is mix in a pale moss block here and there, and you can plant green stuff on it where you can't normally put grass on stone, and that's going to revolutionize path building for people who want paths where it seems like there are plants coming up through the cracks in the stone. You can now plant anything you want to on a pale moss block, and it will look like it blends with the path a lot better. So that's something I've got in my my bucket list of things that I want to do in 2025, like some of the building I want to do. I want to start using techniques like that where I can, because a lot of time you'll want to create a stone path, but you'll end up putting some mossy cobblestone in there, or you'll end up just, sucking it up and putting a full grass block or a dirt block or coarse dirt or something in there just to make it viable to put down some plants that are in the player's path that you're walking. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be fun to use pale moss for that and have a slightly more illusion that it's still a stone floor underneath you.
That's a great idea. I am 1,000% stealing that for some of the paths outside of West Hill that are still stone and I feel are kind of boring, especially when it's a wider road. You just feel like you're repeating the same textures over and over again. So that's a great idea. Wow.
And for medieval society especially, they don't have like weed whackers and stuff that they can use to go out and meticulously clean the grass out of a certain path. So like, you're going to get animals coming through, bringing seeds on their hoofs if they're pulling carts or whatever, and then stuff is going to grow regardless, right? So it feels like it adds a sense of realism if you can incorporate details like that into a path around a city like West Hill.
Yeah. Now, if we could only get grass slabs, like half high grass,
right?
It would be the dream. The dream would come true. The dream would come true. Well, speaking of stuff that's a little bit outside of the norm, the other thing that I was doing over the holidays was still Minecraft related, but was also Lego related. I have finished the West Hill main gate mock Lego set, or my own creation Lego set, which was sent in and designed by Grandpa Crafter, a member of my community. And this is the main gate of West Hill. It's been around since the very start of the build in 2020, so 4 years. He designed it after the original design, which was, I think, changed in 2022. I changed the tower to a bell tower. But it was really cool to put together. It is huge. For folks that are watching the video version on YouTube, you can see it behind me on the table there. And it's 60 centimeters from the top of the tower down to the base. And it's very heavy. I don't know where I'm going to put it. I don't know that I have yet 60 centimeters of clearance. I have these shelves that go just above. They're just at a camera, but I've got Lego sets on these shelves, but I don't know that I have anything that's 60 centimeters tall. So I have to measure to see whether I have enough room there. I'm gonna have to find some other place to put it, because it's gonna have to move off the Lego desk, because I have other things I'd like to do this year. But it was really cool to see something that I designed in Minecraft translated into Lego, and then also see how someone else would translate that into Lego. So like a fan, me as a fan of Lego, often build things in Minecraft based on or inspired by Lego builds. Some of my reference for West Hill are like images of Lego builds of not sets necessarily from Lego, but things that people have just kind of come up with, towers and blacksmith houses and stuff that they just decided to make. And I have those bookmarked on Pinterest. So I've been inspired by Lego to build in Minecraft, and then Grandpa Crafter was inspired by my Minecraft builds to build in Lego. Yeah. And he designed it in a Lego CAD program. I can't remember the name of it right now, but took all the time to do that and pick all the pieces out. And I have actually, it was 2,700 pieces. Yeah, 2,708 pieces. And it took a long time. There are 11 videos on Joel Duggan VODs on YouTube for people that want to go check it out. And you can sort of see it at the end of the last video. It doesn't fit on camera, obviously, because my camera points down and like you really can't get a good look at it. And, I turned the tower vertical so people could see parts of it. But on Instagram, Joel Duggan on Instagram, there is a nice post with a couple of good shots of the build, and then a couple of screenshots from the world early on when I first built the main gate, and then of course the most recent kind of iterations with all the landscaping and the bushes and the ground and stuff around it as well. So it just was a nice reminder of just how long I've been working on West Hill, to go and dig up these screenshots from 4 years ago and just see West Hill with just the main gate, a hint of a front wall, and like nothing else. And like, my gosh, like what? There's a lot of blocks have been placed in this area. So it was a nice reminder of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great to see sort of how far you've come, and yeah, looking at the the oldest screenshot of this has like a default Minecraft village behind it, which is yeah, kind of amazing to see how far West Hill has gone at this point. But yeah, I mean, what a great thing to have as part of your Lego collection is something that you've been looking at in Minecraft for the last however long.
So what have you been up to over the holidays in Minecraft?
I mean, I took it pretty easy. I obviously spent a bit of time away with family. I was away for about a week, so I didn't do too much Minecraft whilst I was there. Had a couple of other bits and pieces that I could play on my laptop, but the laptop, when I travel with it, it doesn't play Minecraft particularly well, and wouldn't have any of my worlds on it unless I transferred them, which I just didn't worry about it. I took it easy, but when I came back, I was doing a bit more streaming. I've gone back to decorate the interiors of some of the builds at my main base, the one that I think of as spawn, even though it's technically like a 700 blocks or so away from spawn. I went back and decorated the interior downstairs level of my blacksmith's forge. Originally, I built the blacksmith just so I could have some place to put an automatic smelter array in, and it's right next to the starter house. The upstairs layer has the smelter in it, and the basement floor I was imagining to be like stone walls and a stone floor and actually have a forge in there. And originally I was thinking I could use it as stabling for some of the horses that I had and donkeys and things that I've tamed, and, you know, have those in stalls somewhere more permanent, because I have them tied up to fence posts right now, and anytime I unload the chunk that the fence post is in and the horse is over the boundary to the next chunk, they end up getting detached from the leads and go wandering off. So I thought I'll figure out some place to have stalls. But once I got in there, I decided I just want this to feel like a blacksmith's workspace. And it's a nice open area. It's pretty big. I wanted a forge in one corner where the chimney stack goes, because the chimney is practical. A while ago, somebody suggested when the super smelter turns on, I should have an observer detecting the last furnace in the row, and then that pushes a hay bale up underneath a campfire with a piston, so you can see the plume of smoke from the chimney a lot more clearly when it's actually active versus when the smelter is finished. And so I wanted the forge to be at the base of this and feel like all of the smoke was going up the same chimney. So I put together, now that we have resin in the game, a little forge off to one side, surrounded by deep slate black stone, like a few things that look like they would have withstood the heat and been maybe charred by the heat and the coals inside of there. There's a magma block in there, there's a shroomlight in there, and 2 resin blocks as sort of the thing that joins those texturally. Then somebody in my Twitch chat, and I feel bad that I didn't take a note of who this was, but it's a really great idea, suggested putting actual resin clumps, the type that you find attached to trees when you've been poking around in a pale garden, to a couple of the blocks on the inside. And the impression that gives, even though it's static, it's not animated, but it gives the impression of there being embers leaping up from the coals in the forge. And I think it looks fantastic. I think it's a really cool effect. And if you're walking around, you don't necessarily... You're glancing at it, it's in your peripheral vision. You don't necessarily think of it as a static thing. You're not staring at it for too long. It gives the impression that it is moving because you're moving. And so, even though it's not like a leaping particle in the same way that when you have lava around, you get those occasional kind of pops and fizzes of particles coming out from lava, it feels like it has the same effect as something like that. But with the added bonus that since I don't have fire spread turned off in this world, it's not going to burn down the wooden parts of my house. So yeah, decided to do that. The rest of the room is a set of shelves and workspaces, tables. There's an anvil with an armor stand pushed through it, so I could have a helmet looking like it was wrapped around the top of the anvil, ready to be beaten into shape. I hung another anvil from the ceiling, and there was a parrot following me around at this point that I'd brought back from a visit to a jungle in a previous episode, and somebody suggested putting the parrot up on the anvil like it's the forge mascot, and it's using the anvil as a perch, or like it's a swing or something. So the parrot is now up there, providing a bit more color to the space, along with a few suits of armor and a few flowers. The torch flower went in there, and a few other things, just to give the area feel a little bit more life and a little bit less just grey and brown feeling, which I know you can relate to, having worked on a medieval town for the last little while. So yeah,
totally.
Yeah, I did that. I did the interior of my dripstone factory, which has a concrete powder floor with a bunch of copper walkways using copper grates. A lot of trial chamber vibes to that. And I've done a little bit more in that now, setting up farms for pale moss, pale hanging moss specifically, for weeping vines and similar plants, like anything that you can bone meal and it grows a couple of stages and you can claim with shears, or glowberries, which you can just harvest by having the machine bone meal them, and then whenever you pick them, it bone meals them again, so you've got a constant supply of glowberries that you can use to plant cave vines. The last item on the checklist was that I went back and I finished the back of the landscape that supports the floating island pirate ship. I built the island, I built the ship a certain distance above it, and I joined the two with some custom terrain, but I just never went back and finished the rear face of that because it's not the side of it that I see at all. So I finally went back and did that. Included some pale moss in that as well, just for a bit of mix of textures, but that's finally in place and is looking a lot better than it did before.
It's wild what you can do with layers now, like resin, pale moss when it's got that creepy kind of like vine that goes up the block next to it. As you were saying earlier about using pale moss to then allow yourself to put green grass into paths. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious. I haven't yet found a use for resin. Someone was asking in my chat the other day, and I'm curious if we are going to get more of these kind of blocks, or I'm not sure what you would, I guess they're layers, similar to like pink petals, resin,
glow lichen,
moss carpet, like glow lichen, like that kind of stuff. Because man, can you really change the look of a texture? And with the addition of one thing, and I know we've talked about this before, you can layer it over all kinds of things. Now, some things it's going to clash with and it's not going to work very well. But I think there was someone, I don't remember the user, but it was one of our members in our Minecraft Hangout that had put glow lichen over lapis blocks or glazed terracotta to create like an entirely different kind of pattern block. And it worked really, really well. And it's the kind of thing that I just hadn't thought of, and because I don't work with glow lichen that much. And I'm curious to see, as we get more updates in 2025, what kind of layers we might be able to get with these kind of things in Minecraft, because I haven't, my brain just goes to all things hot. And you've used it effectively, obviously, in the forge for resin blocks and then the resin clumps, but I haven't yet played around with it like in other contexts. Like what else could I possibly use it for? And I just haven't gotten that far with it yet.
Yeah. Like I'm still in the early stages of experiments with resin so far. And it is a very bright block to use, but there's definitely some odd little details that it'll pop up for, and you'll be happy that you have it rather than not have it, I think. It doesn't quite have the versatility of glow lichen because it doesn't emit any light, and I think glow lichen is really good for that. Plus, it looks so organic versus the resin clumps don't look organic in the same way. It's obviously not meant to be it's an organic material in the sense that it is resin from trees, but it still feels artificial and more mineral-like than plant-like, So yeah, there's a lot that we can still get out of resin, but I don't know if it quite has the versatility. We'll see. There's still plenty of opportunity for it. And speaking of which, we're going to move on into the news. There's not really any at this point. But the Pale Garden, the Garden Awakens update only came out about a month ago, and we have had a winter holiday, so we're skipping our news read this week on account of there being very little on the Minecraft radar as far as updates and upcoming news and that kind of thing. Even the publicity around the Minecraft movie, I think, is taking a bit of a backseat while all of the holiday movie releases get out of the way and they can hype people up for its release in April. So we wanted to talk briefly about, I guess, these are my expectations primarily for what we're going to get in the next little while, and I'm personally thinking we'll probably do a bug fix update next. The main reason being, the last few updates we've had, anytime we've had major features like 1.21 came out and then Bundles of Bravery, between that there was a bug fix update, I think a hot fix just to make sure a couple of issues were nipped in the bud, but then there was a bug fix update after that as well, and then the Garden Awakens update, and then I'm assuming probably another bug fix before we get into snapshots that involve any new features. The only other things on the radar potentially are experimental things like the villager trading rebalance that we saw them experiment with a little while ago, the changes to redstone and minecarts that they've experimented a while ago. And back in December, some folks in our Discord pointed out that the bug with aggroed zombie piglins dropping XP has been marked as fixed, so potentially we see an update including that, and presumably with a lot of accompanying developer notes, because back when they were first testing out ideas of resolving that bug in the Nether update, I believe, there was a bit of community backlash over it because it was a technique that was relied upon quite heavily for XP farms. So I'm expecting there to be maybe a light bug fix update just to clear up some of the stuff that has presumably come out over the last little while before, after Mojang took their holiday break. But yeah, we're not due any new features for a little while, I would imagine, and Minecraft Live is going to happen again at some point because they're planning on doing 2 per year now, but if it's 6 months apart, you wouldn't expect to hear about that until April. So I think we're probably going to be entering a bit of a quiet period, but maybe some bug fixes on the horizon.
April to me would make a lot of sense because a Minecraft movie is meant to come out on the 4th of April. So
yeah,
there would be a lot of hype and press and stuff happening around there. And I could easily see a Minecraft Live presentation, including interviews with, say, Jason Momoa or Jack Black or something to that effect, or more behind the scenes, which I think are almost more effective, at least for me, of selling a Minecraft movie to me.
Yeah.
The more I hear about the work that went into it and what they were trying to do, the more interested I am in seeing it. The trailers, not so much. Mm-hmm. I don't find that they really sell me on it. I mean, I guess there's been a teaser and a trailer, but I haven't really seen enough in those to make me excited. But the behind the scenes make me very curious to see, like, oh, okay, from an artistic standpoint, like I really want to see from a production value, like how they handled this. And so those things, I'm looking forward to seeing more of those. I'm hoping we get more of that in general. More behind the scenes stuff on the Minecraft YouTube channel would be great, especially when there's like slow news weeks and not a lot of updates or new features in the game. I would love to see more behind the scenes featurettes because I'd be happy to talk about those on the show because as an artist and, seeing the concept art and even just game design decisions and being more transparent about how they are approaching these things and what are the decisions and what does the decision tree look like, when a new feature is coming in, or even not just what does it look like, but how has that changed over time? Like what did a decision look like in 1.13 or 1.16 versus what does it look like now in 1.21? So I'm looking forward to stuff like that. And I agree with you. I think that we'll get some bug fixes. We'll see probably some messing around with experimental features because those as of yet don't have a release tied to them. So like they can mess around with minecarts and in experimental features with no expectations from players other than like, well, they're making changes maybe eventually. I mean, the bundles took forever to hit the game. So they could make some changes there, get lots of feedback without the pressure of it having to come out on a specific date. So do you think we're going to get a feature update like a 1.20, 1.5, or do you think we're now going to be waiting for new features until 1.22?
I mean, I don't know as far as version numbers are concerned what their goal is, because right now we're used to major updates coming out and then minor updates fixing bugs with the update, but the majority of the features dropping with a major release. We know that's changed now because they're working on gameplay drops, and they said they haven't abandoned the idea of major version updates entirely, but perhaps those are going to be broader, more thematic, and these little individual things like a new biome with a couple of new materials and a new mob, and like things like bundles and things like armadillos and wolf armor can all occur sort of independently, while a secondary team, from what we understand, minor updates and major updates were split into 2 separate teams a while ago. We talked to Nembon about this back in the episode where he joined us. I think it's going to be the case that we'll see a couple of smaller things like that, but then on the horizon, there's got to be plans for the next major update. So I don't know which we'll see first. I think the minor updates are also a good place for revisions to existing features, which is where some of the experimental things are going with Redstone and with minecarts, but there might still be other things that they think, we can tweak this, we can add a bit of functionality to that. Maybe we can give Resin or iBlossom some extra uses after a bit more player feedback once people have got their hands dirty with some of that stuff, or maybe they'll go back and look at some older features that they think need modernizing slightly, and they can play around with those. So We'll see. But yeah, I agree with you. I think we're likely to see something about Minecraft Live happen around the time the movie gets released. And like you, I would love to see some more behind the scenes. I think in general, Minecraft players like to see that behind the scenes stuff because the game is so creative and is focused on your own story. Seeing other people telling stories in Minecraft is only going to be interesting to some people. Everyone else feels like they're a production designer in their own right. You know, they're using Minecraft to stage all of these scenes and create these elaborate worlds, and they want to see people doing that for the purposes of making a movie, not necessarily seeing the movie itself. Like, the production design side of things interests people in this community. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, though, we should move on to our next segment of the show, which is Chunk Mail. As always, in 2025, we would love to receive some email that we can read out on the show. Give us your opinions about Minecraft, new features, give us questions, lore, deep dives if you want to do stuff like that. Obviously, keep the emails short and sweet if you can, and send them to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. That's the email inbox that we get all of the show email for. And make sure you get a clear subject line in there as well. Helps us include them in the show more easily. Joel is going to read this first one.
First email comes from JD Builds, and the subject is Ambient Sound Discs. Hi, Joel and Johnny. I was listening to the conversation about ambient sounds in episode 329 and had an idea that could be used for in-game play. What if in each biome there were disc fragments, like the ones in the ancient cities, that could be found in the various structures, trail ruins, or villages, and when crafted together would make an ambient sound disc, one disc for each major biome. For example, the jungle ambient sounds disc, when crafted, could play parrot and monkey noises, while the ocean ambient sounds disc might have waves splashing or a whale song. Perhaps even allow players to craft blank music discs, and along with a jukebox, venture out and quote-unquote record ambient sounds from each biome to make a collection of ambient sound discs. While these ideas do not solve the problem of the lack of ambient sounds in biomes, it would give players in-game control over soundscaping in their builds. JD Builds survived, but jumped at the sound of a lion's roar in the Savannah ambient sound disc.
That's one way to jump scare yourself with your own field recordings. I like that. That's fun. Yeah, it's interesting to me, the notion of not just having an ambient sound disc that was linked to a specific biome. I like the idea of it being a bit of a treasure hunt, you know, gathering fragments of it and that kind of thing. But the notion of the player making field recordings themselves is an interesting one, because we're finding music discs as what feels like a relic of the past of some kind. Like, aside from the way you get them from creepers, you're always finding them in dungeons, in ancient cities, in trail ruins, strongholds, some really interesting locations that feel like they are structures left behind by whoever came before the player. And the fact that the player themselves can't make them, they can only listen to them, is an interesting one. It makes them an artifact of the world's history rather than a technology that we have in the present time. We just have the means to reproduce it. It's like if somebody found a bunch of CDs but had no like CD burning software or anything to reproduce it. So I like the idea of giving the player the agency to make recordings themselves. The only weird thing about that is that it would seem odd that we could record ambient jungle sounds if they aren't already present in game. You know, you hit record in the jungle somewhere, you listen to the silence around you, and then when you play it back, it's a bunch of monkeys squawking and lions and tigers and that kind of thing. Like I can't imagine that feeling like a good experience, because it feels like you'd be missing out on something, or like the player couldn't hear it until you committed it to a recording, which, I don't know, doesn't feel quite as realistic as making real life field recordings. But I feel like if it can get people interested in the process of field recordings, which they've gone and done those to get the mob sounds that we have in the game already. Like the panda sounds come from real life pandas, likewise the goats, and a bunch of other mobs are all sounds generated from field recordings of real world animals. I think it's a good way of getting people interested in the real life process of doing that, even if it's for a video game project like this.
Yeah, I like the recording idea as well. I couldn't wrap my head around how it might happen from a technical standpoint because of the lack of ambient sounds currently. And what would you be recording? Like, are you if you're recording something like maybe there's a nice squirrel and other forest noise happening in something like a taiga biome. But then what if a zombie comes up to you, or a skeleton, or that you can hear in a cave, and then you've got this weird bone jingle on your recording that you maybe don't want. So I feel like the recording thing almost does the opposite, because Minecraft is so procedural and you'd have to have almost a controlled environment to record what you want. So that's why I like the idea of collecting the disc fragments and putting together an ambient sound, and then you can then control the soundscape of your area. And like, how does that work if you start mixing and matching? Because as soon as you give players control, you give them creativity. So like, if I go and I collect something from what does the ambient sound disc from the Nether sound like? I mean, there's several different biomes in the Nether. What if you put that in the overworld? Like if you put like another basalt delta sound in a desert, like what kind of juxtaposition does that cause? Or an icy biome or something like that. That there could be some really fun ways of adding sound. Like imagine if like the lava bubbling sound, I mean, which you could do now if you hid like a lava source somewhere nearby, you could make it sound like a cauldron was bubbling, or you could make it sound like there was, a Bacta tank in like a Star Wars build was making noises. But, there's few ways to do that because there's not a lot of things in Minecraft that emit sound. As far as blocks goes, I would love to have that kind of control with, walking up to your little cottagecore house, and being able to have like bird song and like chirping and bees, or those kind of like little cozy ambient noises that you often have with those kind of games or builds. And I like the idea of the control, and I like the concept of collecting the disc fragments and then assembling it yourself. You have to adventure, you have to collect. It's very Minecrafty as far as a suggestion to a new gameplay feature, as opposed to just like finding a disc in a chest, or having the disc be something that has to magically drop from like a creeper and a skeleton shooting one another. Like I really feel like the disc fragments and the assembling of those discs is really cool. I would wonder if we could take it a step farther and say, like, you've got jungle ambient sounds and you've got beach ambient sounds. I wonder what kind of interesting thing could happen if there was a way to combine them in a different order. So like maybe you have like one or two fragments from the jungle and one or two fragments from the beach or the ocean. Could you combine those for a unique disc, that doesn't have any biome tied to it? Like, what would that sound like? And how do you communicate that to a player? I don't know. Maybe it's the shape of the discs, and maybe just someone has to try it and see what happens. I don't know, but that could be fun, and it could be a way to create some different sounds. And I know that on Hermitcraft this season, they have, it's either a data pack or a mod where you can add your own sounds to music discs. And that's where my brain went when they mentioned recording in the email, was like, the freedom and the creativity to do stuff like that. Because I remember door opening sounds were added. I know that there were, a lot of them were like more funny clips from videos of hermits saying silly things. But I feel like when you have that kind of ability to add sounds into Minecraft, it really takes it, like we were talking about production design and staging in Minecraft. Well, a lot of Minecraft players are either game developers or are on their way to become game developers because of the access that the game gives you to creative tools. And being able to do the soundscape in Minecraft is just like another tool that you could then apply to maybe an indie game that you're going to build down the line. And I love the idea of giving more sound control to players. I think it's a really cool one.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the upcoming video that I've got coming out soon about pale hanging moss, I really like the combination of being able to put that block with either logs or leaves from the pale oak biome, and that producing that kind of ambient creaking sound. I've put a bunch of those underneath the deck of my floating pirate ship now, so whenever you're up there,
nice.
There's like this sort of loose association of like a network of pale hanging moss underneath the deck of the boat that makes it sound like the ship is creaking in the wind. And I explained in the video that I'm just trying to find ways to use that idea so that encourages Mojang to develop more mechanics like this. It's not necessarily my favorite implementation of the mechanic, but I think if we can find ways to make it work, then that signals to the development team, let's figure out more ways to get players interested in finding ways to work sound into the game. And yeah, more mechanics like that would be amazing. I think giving players more control over that stuff, big fan, especially when it's not attached to leaving mobs somewhere, because mobs create other complications. If you want to have a guardian sound in, like, I remember a player doing this absolutely ages ago, where they trapped a guardian in the attic of their haunted house, and so that you had this kind of like moaning in the background, but that has to have water, so that means the ceiling would drip as well, which could be cool in a haunted house, but like you got to make sure that the guardian is in water, otherwise it's going to slap around and then different soundscapes end up getting added. Or if you wanted an elder guardian up in there, you've got to worry about mining fatigue. But if you just had the sounds available to you in some way, that could be really fun. I know there are resource packs that allow you to do that with mob heads and note blocks now, but that also requires you to be able to get a lot more mob heads, which requires a whole separate data pack, and it's a stacking on stacking of data packs at that point, when what we're really after is the mechanics available in a more vanilla context. I also think, going back to the history thing, the existence of music disc fragments would imply, if you find them in ruins and stuff, that those are older recordings, which would in turn imply that the extra animals, like the whale song that the correspondent here was suggesting, JD Build says, maybe whale song, maybe monkey noises, you don't have those in Minecraft already, so that implies that they are extinct mobs in the same way that the sniffer was, until we were able to dig up the eggs and bring it back. So kind of interesting that that's another way you could imply more history to a Minecraft world in the natural world, and not just in the way of like the warden being out there and, secret hostile mobs being a part of the world. It'd be an interesting aspect of Minecraft's evolving history. Moving on to our second email, Lord Valor wrote in with the subject, From Creative to Survival. Hi Pix and Joel, for Christmas this year, I gave my girlfriend a copy of Minecraft. She has been playing exclusively on a super flat, peaceful, creative world with no day-night cycle. She has expressed interest in joining my Minecraft realm, and everyone is excited for her to join the server, but my concern is her transition between creative and survival. Since we are all in endgame, I can see her getting overwhelmed by the amount of things to do and get in the game. How can I ensure that my girlfriend has a fun transition from an exclusively creative experience to survival? Her having fun is my first priority. Thanks for all you guys do for the Minecraft community. Lord Valor died trying to protect his girlfriend from another creeper that snuck up behind her.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun. I think it's really cool to be able to share Minecraft with your significant other. We've heard time and time again, families that play Minecraft together, partners, kids, all getting together, having a family realm. And I think that's such a cool thing about Minecraft, because it is accessible to so many people. Even like the non-video gamers in your life, I think will catch on to Minecraft faster than you think. My suggestion to help her ease into what sounds like a long-standing Minecraft realm would be to try a short survival world on her own before joining, or with you, like a two-player. Like get a realm for a month and just like play together, just to kind of show her the ropes and get used to that survival gameplay. Things like creepers and zombies and day-night cycle, and the limited, or not, I shouldn't say the limited resources, but like the fact that you have to gather stuff. There's a bit more planning to what you have to do. The good thing is that, of course, in an endgame server, depending on how the community works, she would have access to probably most of the blocks that you would in creative. And so, through farms or trading with server mates or people willing to give things, she'd have access to the same sort of stuff. So there wouldn't be quite as much artistic limitation. But I think that there's something really nice about understanding the value of the quality of life at an endgame server, like iron farms, enchanting, nether travel. If you have experienced that early game Minecraft for yourself and realize, oh, that's really far, that's a pain. Like the desert is miles away, but I want a lot of glass. Well, it's so much better now that there's another tunnel, or even better that there's like someone that's got a super smelter, and there's all these different things that you then value more if you've tried to do it basically the old-fashioned way, which is like the day one Minecraft experience. And the only other thing I would suggest would be, if you do play together, rather than guiding her through the world, let her ask questions. I've done this before with either introducing friends to Minecraft, or even my own introduction with a friend bringing me in. There's just so much information available about the game, and anybody that's played the game as long as you have is going to have a lot to say, and it can be overwhelming for a new player. So rather than just like info dumping by accident, with all the best intentions, that might be overwhelming as well. It's a lot to remember. And so wait until she gets to the point she's like, all right, how do I get this done? Like what, like I want to do this and I'm not sure where to go. Like, what do I do next? And then just provide those answers and, help out with stuff on the realm. I know that with our listeners that have wrote in specifically, I think it was more parents with kids. A lot of times the parents were letting the kids do the creative stuff, but then they would be out doing like some collecting, some extra resource gathering, protecting, like killing the zombies at night and that kind of stuff. And then allowing the newer player, the younger player, in this case, it would just be a newer player with your girlfriend to be the creative architect and still have those creative juices flowing, but then have the support of someone that knows a little bit more about, the world and where to get certain things to help truncate that exploration roadblock sometimes. Because sometimes in Minecraft, like you want to do something, but if you're new, you don't know where to go to do it. Like you don't know how far do you have to dig to get, a certain type of stone, or where do you have which direction do you go to find the right biome for the right kind of wood, and that kind of stuff might be, worth communicating to her.
Yeah, I mean, we can assume that considering her entire experience so far has been creative and super flat, she's interested in building. So I think that's a great place to start. Is like, let's start by establishing a base for you. Like, let's build you a house. Let's I think obviously in survival you're going to start out with just making shelter to begin with and getting your early resources. And if she wants to learn that part of the game, I think that part is still fairly vital. It helps prepare you for if you die unexpectedly and you have to get some of your stuff back, especially in the early stages of setting up, even on an established server, you're not always going to have a place that you can go for easy access to iron. And, if you've lost some diamond armor or you want diamond tools to get back to where you died or anything like that, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to get reestablished if you know where to go and you've established your own base. I think my first advice really is just don't throw her in at the deep end. If everyone else is at endgame, then maybe don't just chuck her a spare elytra and expect her to be flying around with the rest of you. She's probably still getting used to controlling the game, and controlling the game in survival is very different from controlling it in creative, when flying around jetpack mode isn't even how you fly around with elytra. So it feels a little different. Because you're at endgame, you're worried about things feeling overwhelming. That's, I think, a fairly solid, as long as you're aware of that and you're not going to immediately expect her to be at pace with the rest of you, then you've got reasonable expectations there to begin with. I totally agree with letting her ask questions instead of just dropping knowledge and expecting her to keep up. On the few occasions where I've actually been able to show people Minecraft in person instead of, in the form of the tutorial videos that I make, I've always just asked them, what do you want to do? What does the instinct tell you that you want to get taken care of? And I'll say, at nighttime the monsters are going to come out, so we should probably have some shelter before then. Where do you want to make a shelter? Do you want to dig into a cave? Do you want to build a house? Do you want to just find a comfortable hillside and make a little hidey hole that we can skip the night in? That kind of thing. And I think getting people established with understanding that it's a player-led game. Once you're in survival, you set your own objectives. She's probably used to setting her own objectives in a creative context, but in terms of how you interact with the world around you, that's a really crucial element. And I think the best thing is just to make sure everyone else on the server knows that unless she asks for them specifically, don't just hand her a bunch of resources, because you sort of want to have the experience of going out and finding iron for yourself for the first time so you can make a set of iron armor. It's great if you want to join her for early game resource gathering and caving, because caving with the buddy system is a great idea. But the email sign-off at least says, protecting her from another creeper that snuck up behind her. That's the right instinct to have. I think almost like... you don't want it to be like a nature documentary, right? Where you're following somebody around and just waiting for, the wildness of the world to happen to them. You do want to be able to watch their back a little bit and make sure their early experience is a comfortable one. Maybe don't bring your full set of netherite or whatever kind of tier of tools you have. Maybe turn up with some leather or iron gear of your own, so it feels like you're on more equal footing. But then she can be okay, how do we get the iron armor so that she can be more protected as well? And then you can kind of show her the ropes if you need to. But you can be an extra set of eyes looking for ores. You can watch her back if mobs are creeping up on her. I think caving with the buddy system is a really nice way to play early game Minecraft. And then, yeah, you can bring a couple of extra resources once she kind of knows the lay of the land and presumably wants to do a bit of building. And I guess, yeah, be there to answer questions about how on earth you build in survival after you're used to flying around in creative.
Welcome to Scaffolding 101.
Yes. Yeah, honestly, I need to do a Scaffolding 101 video. I'm not sure if I've really covered scaffolding in full, but yeah, even just dirt blocks to begin with, always a good start. Thinking of things we want to cover, we are going to dive into our main discussion topic, which is our plans for 2025, specifically the Minecraft ones. But I'm thinking new year, new minds. Are we going to deviate hugely from the way we've played Minecraft in 2024? Is it going to be more of the same? What are our focuses going to be for the new year? We don't tend to do New Year's resolutions so much as just figuring out what's next on the agenda. So what's next for you, Joel?
I've made this threat before, and I do think it's well within reach this time around, which is to finish up West Hill. There are very few things left on the to-do list. One of the things I did early in December or closer to Christmas with like a resource gathering mission, but I also took the time to take the to-do list that I have in game in an in-game book and just copy over the stuff left into a new book. And instead of 9 pages, it was like 2.5 or 3.
Nice.
So there's really only a few things left to do. And one of them actually I've made some progress on. The challenge was to figure out what to do with the tables and chairs data pack that no longer functions and what to replace it with. The good news is that I've spoken with the developers of the data pack, and I've got a little bit of code that I can run when I'm in the presence of these ghost trapdoor entities that kind of hover around.
Yes.
It takes 2 bits of the command to remove each one. And so it's kind of repetitive because like very often you'll have a table and 2 chairs, which means I've got to run this command 6 times to get rid of all the trapdoors.
Right.
But I can get rid of them and I can replace them with something. So I'm either going to replace some things with in-game vanilla blocks. Like some cases, a stripped spruce block will look like a butcher's block as opposed to a table. I might just go that route for simplicity. And you can also dress them up by putting like signs on them or trapdoors on their side to kind of give them a different texture, combine them with barrels, that kind of thing. But I was looking at Valhalsia for a furniture mod to replace the tables and chairs. However, that has not been updated to 1.21.4, so that is not as encouraging. I don't yet have a solution. I would like to try to find something that is got enough tables and chairs in it that I could use it in the modern city as well, because I have used some of the more modern looking tables and chairs from the data pack in the modern city. The dark oak ones specifically had like kind of like IKEA chair, cafe chair kind of vibe to them. And I was really happy with some of those builds in the modern city, and I would hate to have to come up with something else. And despite the headaches of dealing with the data pack, I do want to try and get a mod in there because the idea of using stairs as chairs in Minecraft, I can't sell myself on it. I'm spoiled by the idea of having tables and chairs, so I'm going to try to figure that out. But the remaining things in West Hill are basically like landscaping. You know, there's these 2 little farms that I'm working on. There's the abandoned farmstead, which is almost done. And then there's the apiary, the bee farm right next door. And those are the 2 farms that are left. And that completes the major builds in the valley. There's just the landscaping around the river and then the furniture stuff inside the town. And I have not yet done the final decoration on the keep. So like the main hall, the kitchen, and then the upper bedrooms and stuff of the keep don't have anything in them. They're pretty empty. And the basement, of course. And the basement is the last thing. That is currently my storage room. So it's like shulker boxes on the wall and odd chests and knickknacks around. And all that has to get moved over to the crypt, which is underneath the graveyard. And that was always the intention, is like take all the large block storage and move it all over to the crypt. I'll move the shulker boxes from the wall into chests. And then I'll turn the basement of the keep into a honeymead distillery or something kind of fun. And that'll be the end of it. So it sounds like a lot, but in terms of how long this build has been going, I can definitely see the end. And I am hoping to wrap it up because I would like to start moving on to other things and not feel like working on something in the Nether or working on another build is pulling me away from West Hill. I'd like to be able to move away from West Hill and like really focus on like what's next, and definitely try to do some smaller projects as well, just because it's nice to check things off.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm looking at, really. Like the big one for me is just building more. I feel like I used to build casually a lot more, and lately I've just been psyching myself out about it for a few reasons. The primary one being, I think my standards have grown. I've done some really big projects recently that I was really happy with. I feel like also the community has seen the Minecraft building game sort of improve exponentially with new blocks added and new approaches to building. And I follow a lot of builders who I think I'm really impressed by, and I feel sometimes a little intimidated by that, more so than inspired. So, like, I've done some stuff that I'm really happy with. I want future builds to follow suit, but I need to recognize that not everything is going to be a showstopper kind of build. Like, I need to do like little bits and pieces here and there. I'm also, because I make tutorials primarily, I'm torn between feeling the need to package a build as a video tutorial and not have builds kind of pop up and people say, wait, how did you build that? But I also don't always know what to say for repeated build tutorials. Because I don't make build tutorials primarily, the block for block tutorial side of things never really appeals to me as a format for the survival guide. And so I'm more about giving people the vague ideas and the process of planning stuff and the process of sketching out ideas and then just kind of tinkering with little bits and pieces until you get it right. But those are such vague concepts rather than being something really specific and instructions to follow that I'm not certain that I can really get much mileage out of repeated video tutorials kind of covering the same thing. So I'm torn about that aspect of it, but I do want to just get in and build more. I'm getting more comfortable building on stream, or at least doing interiors on stream for the last couple of streams has given me some like confidence in the ability to do that. And I'm finding that Twitch chat has been a really good sounding board for ideas rather than people backseating and telling me what to do. People come up with some really helpful suggestions when I ask if I, think, does this look good here? Should I try something else? And people are more than happy to chip in. So I think it's fun to have that sounding board when I'm doing things live. I think last of all, I just need to spend more time sketching in creative. Most of my recent builds that I've really liked have been planned in creative first, and I was a lot happier with those than the ones that I typically freestyle in survival, just because of scale. I think it's really difficult for me to work at a larger scale starting from survival, because you've got to imagine something a lot larger than what you're building block by block in front of you. And so it's difficult to do something large like a civic building or something like that. If you're building like a town hall as opposed to just a residence, then you need to think a lot bigger, and visualizing something that large is difficult for me on a survival scale, where if I can get the blueprint of it in, get the footprint figured out in creative, and then, block in walls here and there and make everything kind of temporary and swap things out quicker, I find that a much easier approach. So I think I need to tinker more in creative before I bring some of that stuff over into survival. But I'm finding a bunch of projects that I designed a farm or just built a farm that I was already familiar with and never really did anything around it. Like you were talking about having like a honeymead distillery and a beekeeper's sort of setup. I have a honey farm and a honeycomb farm right in front of my like starter house area that have just been sat there in the plains biome with nothing to decorate around them. They're just the functionality of the farm and nothing else. Whereas in season 2 of Survival Guide, I at least built a beekeeper's cottage and went to the trouble of doing that stuff. So I think that's what I want to do, is find homes for some of those orphaned projects and maybe make an aesthetic build around them. Do stuff like that on stream that feels like I'm tidying up the loose ends before I move on to the bigger things.
I'm curious about like the block by block and the kind of like building intimidation, because that's something that I have the opposite experience of. I really like doing the YouTube the Twitch live building. And not having any time in creative. I very seldom plan anything in Minecraft. I'll have some ideas and some inspiration, but I tend to work through it all live on stream and not turn that into an edited YouTube video. And I wonder if you could kind of leave your Twitch space as like that. Kind of, if people want the block by block, you can say, hey, look, come back to the Twitch channel, because you'll see the process, like the actual debate, the back and forth, the trial and error, like all that stuff. And then you could use like either clips or progress or tours maybe on the survival guide to like say, hey, look, this thing that just popped up in the background, I built it live on Twitch, but like, here's like what I was thinking and the problems I ran into and how I troubleshooted that. Like you can almost do like a book report, on your build after doing it live on Twitch. I think that would be Really cool. But I've always thought the builds that you end up putting around things are usually really unique. And I think the major change that I've seen, just kind of anecdotally, has been like the scale.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like the chunk that you raised out of the ground in SOS, and I feel like there was one other large build too. Oh, the town, the um, Elden Ring inspired
Yeah.
castle one as well. Those kind of things. I mean, I guess it's tough with like the survival guide, because at some point the survival guide ends up starting anew, depending on what new features come to Minecraft. So you'd have to find a project that you knew you could finish before that reset happens in terms of like the scale. So with the Windy City that you're working on, like, is that at a scale that you're happy with, or would you want to do it bigger?
I think I need to rescale some of the blueprints that I've left myself, some of the sort of shop footprints and stuff I figured out, because I built the gateway and I realized that that was larger than the space I had left it for, so I maybe expanded that by a couple of blocks each way, and now the road in front of that I had planned is too small, and some of the stuff needs to be kind of shuffled around. I also realized that I need some of the houses and things below to have gaps in them or support for the monorail going through them or above them, and so I need to plan the city around that a little bit more. I think it was not bad to have like a plan to begin with, just so it feels like you know what you can fit into that space, but I think the scale is altered slightly. I'm building bigger than player scale, where I used to almost exclusively build player scale, and so yeah, it gets a little tricky. But I think the main thing is, I don't know what people want as far as tutorials go, because people tell me that they want block-by-block tutorials whenever I make something that's more about the broad strokes of how did I come up with some of this stuff and the inspiration behind things. People say, yeah, but how do I build this, though? They want, like, step-by-step instructions. And unfortunately, if I'm doing something live on Twitch, I'm not necessarily thinking about it as a series of step-by-step instructions, because then all of the trial and error and stuff goes into it in survival. I feel like I can only do step-by-step instructions if I start from a creative standpoint. But then anytime I do anything with step-by-step instructions, the other half of the community comes out, and they're the people who want more of the creative inspiration and the, I don't want to build this specific thing. How do I take these ideas and apply them to my own builds? So, I'm working for both audiences and trying to find a happy medium between the two, which I'm not certain I've found yet.
It's tricky. It's funny how Minecraft is this sandbox for everyone to play in, and then some people want instructions. Like they want the Lego book of like, do this, put this, snap this to this, add this next, then on to bag two, and on and on. I tend to try, when I'm streaming, especially when it comes to like textures or techniques or ideas, or trying to like provide concepts as opposed to instructions on how to build a thing, and because I don't particularly want people to like copy Westel. Westel is kind of mine. Like I if you're inspired by it, great, but like the building it block for block would be a weird thing. But I like the idea of providing people like, well, here's how I handle like a 3x3 tower, or here's how I handle a 7x7 tower, or making roofs larger in Minecraft. And the thing that I struggle with is scale. I struggle with building beyond player scale with something that looks terrestrial. So I can build beyond player scale in a nether hub or a redstone farm, or something that's a little bit more wild, I guess. Like the donut farm we have in the lava lake for the zombified piglins is a good example. But when it comes to like building a house or a castle or something, like I can't quite get to the point where I'm doing like player scale and a half, or even twice player scale. And I see builds online, like I see stuff on Instagram where like, wow, that's beautiful. Like, how do they do that? And you're like realizing that is 100 blocks tall. Like that is a huge amount of like, the player would look teeny tiny. And that could work if you've set up your expectations of that build in that area to have like these larger than life builds. But I do find that sometimes, either for practicality and the ability to complete something in a reasonable amount of time, I do feel like I tend to go player scale. But I find sometimes, I think we've talked about this before too, the limitations of player scale helps you be more creative, in the same way that I think you've mentioned before on the show, that Minecraft not giving you stairs and slabs in absolutely every block and every palette that they have forces you to be more creative with the block choices that you make, and means that players come up with unique ways to achieve the things that they want to achieve without it just being quote unquote made easy by the developer by providing these things that everybody says that they want, but in reality, maybe not. Although I still want short grass. That's just me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like in theory, everybody wants certain things. In practice, I think there are going to be some people who can take that approach that they want things to be more like free flowing and creative, and people can juxtapose one block in place of another and be perfectly happy with it. There are some people for whom that does not exist. There are some people for whom like the absolute realism of certain blocks prevents them from building with substitute blocks. Like the kind of folks who say, like, if you want a brick wall to look like a brick wall, it should just be made out of bricks. It shouldn't have all of the extra, granite blocks and things like that mixed in, because that doesn't feel realistic to them. And that's just a different point of view. But yeah, I think those are the people who want the kind of more Lego set style instructions. I want to make my builds more artistic, because I admire the builders who use blocks more like a painter's palette rather than something that needs to conform to specific ideas of what the materials are in game. But I recognize those are two different approaches, right? Fortunately, outside of all of the building stuff, I also have my eye on a few farms that the survival guide is currently lacking. So I think in 2025, I'm going to be going to the Nether. I'm going to be building a gold farm. I'm probably going to be attaching some bartering setups to it. I need to build a permanent froglight farm as well, because I spawned in a basalt delta the first time in this world, cleared out a large area around my portal so that I could work with some of that space. And in the end, I just tied up 3 frogs, one of each color, to a fence post, and anytime I killed a magma cube, they would just hoover up all of the little ones and drop a couple of froglights. So I have froglights, I just don't have them in a farmable capacity and a larger scale. And I think I want to use some of those in the Windy City, so I think a froglight farm is going to be either a basalt delta or a bastion spawner farm, or both. But I will probably build that first, because, as I mentioned in the sort of brief post-newsread, the post-lack of newsread discussion, there is on the horizon a fix for the zombie piglin aggro bug that means they currently drop XP regardless of whether the player has killed them or not. And I think that's going to change gold farms, or at least some gold farms. A lot of them already account for the player needing to kill the zombie piglins, and there are some really interesting new designs out there I've seen recently. Look up Doc M's farm that he uses on Hermitcraft for something completely out there, but very cool. And I think the gold farm is probably going to wait until we hear about the next update or so, about whether or not that change is coming soon. I might hold on to that one for a little bit, even though the bartering farms have really interesting resources that I like to get my hands on in larger quantities. But Nether stuff, I need to firm up plans for farms and plans for long-term Nether transport. I came up with ideas for a Nether hub a little while ago. I scrapped them, and right now I have a series of portals and a very informal way of getting between them. I literally just fly to and from portals most of the time. The only one that has a proper path built to it is an iceboat road that takes me out to the Windy City, because that's about 1,200 blocks in the Nether, so it's just faster to get there with ice and boats. But I do want to have something that feels a bit more substantial, like a Nether hub this year. I think that's something my world has been missing, and something that feels like a staple of a lot of other Minecraft worlds, so I think Nether hub is definitely on the cards for me.
I'd like to do some work around our Nether as well. I'd like to tighten up some of the Nether roads, and I don't necessarily want to redo them. There's something nostalgic and very practical about the cheap cobblestone roads that we have going outside of the Nether hub.
Yes.
They're blast proof. You can dig little trenches on the outsides of them, and they're all slabbed, so they don't have any piglins spawning on them. You just have to deal with ghasts from time to time. And I mean, I know that if you just keep running, the ghasts miss. The problem is if you're close to the hub, when they miss, they sometimes blow up the side of the hub. And so something I want to do is create an outside on the hub, because the hub right now looks great from the inside, but the outside of the hub looks like an inside out hub. It's like when you flip over an embroidered t-shirt and you look on the inside. So that's what the outside looks like. So I'd like to try to spruce that up a bit. It might be cool to find other blast resistant blocks and put them in the roads, not necessarily to texture them, but even to like say, hey, if you're going to the jungle or if you're going to the gold farm, take the deep slate road as opposed to the cobblestone roads, just so people can use it to maybe get around a little bit better. There are some tunnels in some places that are short enough where it's like, it's kind of dumb that this is an outside road. It's really only 30 blocks, so we should just cover it over, and then everybody walking on it doesn't have to worry about ghasts at all. So I've got that kind of on my mind. There's not many nether farms I think we need. Most of that stuff we have in the overworld now anyway. But there are some farms that I'd like to implement. A lot of them are more like the challenge of making a farm for just me. So the idea that I have for the sci-fi zone that I've been talking about for a while is to do farms that are player scaled. So not for a server, but like a small iron farm for me, a small sugarcane farm or whatever it is that I need, in that area, especially if it turns out to be a smelter or something for building blocks. And some of them might be larger because, if I need a lot of concrete, for example, then I'm going to build a really large facility for that because I think I would need a lot of that in a sci-fi zone. But other things that come up, and the cool thing about that project is like, I don't know what I don't know. Like I don't know what I need yet. So I kind of have to get there and see how it will just organically unfold. And I'm hesitant because I don't want to just enter into another project that's going to be 4 years, just like Westhill.
Yeah.
And so I want to try to find other things around the server, like little bits in the nether, like our end, beating the dragon a bunch of times and then saying, all right, we're done. We now can do maybe a community build in the end and like connect all the gateway portals with a nice big ring or something like that. Could be kind of cool to mess around with. So I'll have to figure out what's going to happen there. But I'd like to have some smaller completable projects in between the sci-fi zone and Westhill. And a lot of that has to do with new materials and farms and things that we don't have. I've already updated the moss farm. The collection system needs to be fixed, and it does make pale moss now, so we have that. So that's great. But again, like those are things that now that I know how useful that is, I wouldn't mind having one of those on my own, just to kind of run on my own time. And a lot of the farms right now that are server serving are in zones that are not loaded because people are now at an endgame server that's almost 8 years old. Everybody's off in their own realm. Cosmic's in Somerville, Alistair's in Avalon. I'm in Westhill right now, but possibly moving on. So we're all miles from Dartmouth Meadows, which is where a lot of the basic farms are. So they're not running. So I want to try to figure out what do I need on a regular basis and what am I constantly traveling back to Dartmouth Meadows to get, like gunpowder is a really good example. So stuff like that is going to be fun to figure out. And in a way, going back to early Minecraft without having to go back to like day one tools and stuff like that. I'm still going to have beacons and all kinds of cool stuff. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. The other stuff I have planned includes a copper aging machine again, but I haven't built my latest iteration of that in survival yet. I only designed it in creative, so I think I'm going to probably end up doing that under the Windy City because I'll be building a lot on the surface. It's an easy way to make sure that the copper underneath is going to get aged because I'll be around it and random ticks will be working and stuff. So that's another reason to stick around a fairly large build project. And I have a reasonable amount of copper from tearing down a trial chamber, and I think the debate to be had here is, do you still need to farm copper and use that and age that when you have access to so much pre-aged copper, pre-waxed copper, and all of the variant blocks that you can get in the trial chamber? I can always think of bigger projects to use it on, so the answer is usually yes for me, but we'll see what else I get a chance to do. And then I think, honestly, just on a mechanical, like, base game vanilla level, returning to trial chambers is something I've been meaning to do for a little while because a few additions have been made in patches since 1.21 released, and I haven't been back to them yet. So I kind of want to seek one of those out in newly generated chunks and see if I can spot one of the additions and has anything else been changed about them that is worth taking advantage of. But yeah, it seems like we both got a lot that we want to do in 2025, so it's good to have some new projects on the horizon and to be wrapping up some of the older projects in style. I think for now, though, that's where we'll wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunk. So thank you so much for listening to our first episode of the new year. If you want more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about, you can visit thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. We also have our monthly Minecraft Hangouts, where our patrons can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft that month. We also have a quarterly hangout on the horizon as well. There are currently 302 patrons, which is down from 308 as of the last episode we recorded, but that was about a month ago now. Special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. You can find us at the Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on YouTube, as well as any podcasting platform where you currently listen to your podcasts. The email for the show is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its third season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which just came off a holiday break and will be back hopefully this week. You can find us through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online is at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. There's a huge holiday roundtable episode out right now, about an hour and 45 minutes. Me and about a half dozen friends hanging out and talking about things like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is a fantastic game, by the way, as well as Secret Level, the animated anthology about video games on Prime. Yeah, Amazon Prime. Well, worth watching. I've watched almost all of them. I think I'm just about got 1 or 2 left. We had only just started when we talked about it on the show. I stream on Twitch at 1 o'clock Atlantic. That's UTC minus 4 hours, Tuesday through Saturday. I'm playing Minecraft, sprinkling in some other games, so look for that. And Lego. There's a new Lego set coming. I'm not sure what it is, but check that out on Fridays.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and 2025 is a perfect square.